Dragons are cool. I like dragons, you probably like dragons, and DreamWorks definitely likes dragons. But do you know who else liked dragons? John Ronald Reuel Tolkien. He liked dragons so much that The Hobbit, his first book, is basically an adaptation of Beowulf, and his battle with a dragon sitting atop a giant hoard of gold. The thing is, he didn't name many dragons, which is great for me, because today at Nox's library we're going to rank every single one he did name, and hopefully by the end of today you'll know about more than just Smaug. We start with Gostir. We know nothing about Gostir. Well, that's almost true. You see, Gostir's name means Dread Glance in Noldorin, the precursor to Sindarin, and he was one of the many dragons of Morgoth, although that's about all we know about him. I don't know why he even has a name. We don't even know if this scaly fella is a cold drake, meaning that they can't breathe fire, or a fire drake, which you don't need me to explain to you, come on. Now, Gostir has a few non-canon appearances as a cold drake in the Middle-earth role-playing game, but He's also mentioned alongside Lamthank, who's apparently his older brother and is also a cold drake in that same RPG. But in canon, he's more likely just a giant snake, which is why I'm not including him here officially. If I did, Lamthank would get a 1 out of 10. Boo! We don't even know if the dude is a dragon or a snake, so there's almost nothing to rank. Gostir, however, has a boss, an associate, and a rough period of time in which he was active. That's basically a job application right there, so for doing the bare minimum, he gets a 3 out of 10.
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Now let's go to the dude that everyone knows, Smaug. Smaug has a lot going for him. He's the last great dragon in Middle-earth and was mighty enough to evict 2 entire city populations, had a fat bank account, and we got Benedict Cumberbatch doing this just to play him.
I am fire! I am death!
Now that is marvellous. As far as power is concerned, Smaug is pretty run-of-the-mill for a fire drake, which still makes him extremely dangerous. He basically gets beaten by a bird and a dude with a black arrow, and no, I'm not looking at how the films did it, which is kind of embarrassing if you're built like Smaug. Seriously, that random bird is pivotal to Smaug's downfall. Still, I'm going to give the Hobbit's titular fire-breathing lizard a lot of credit for what he did story-wise. Being the main villain of The Hobbit has to count for something, and we know a lot about his personality, being greedy and vain. Smaug doesn't really do anything outside The Hobbit, and his story is relatively low stakes compared to a lot of other dragons we have later. Still, he's the OG, at least as far as publication is concerned, and he's the one that everyone knows. I do want to preface that I'm not saying Smaug's the first dragon in general, we'll get to him later, but for now, I'm going to give Smaug a respectable 7.5 out of 10.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Before we get into the literal big boys, let's go to the other dragons slain in the Third Age, Scatha the Worm. Now Scatha is a cold drake who is long, like a worm, it's in the name. He was also blind, and mute. Yeah, this dragon slaying is sounding far less impressive than Smaug's. Well, let's not take too much credit away. Scatha was said to be one of the greatest dragons to infest the North Range, but considering that he was blind, mute, and incapable of breathing fire, it's kind of embarrassing for a lot of the other dragons in the same region, and almost everything we know about Scatha comes from a poem. Titled Scatha the Worm. I guess we can't knock it, it makes sense. Now Scatha had a den in the Grey Mountains, where he had his hoard of treasure, including sharp bright stones, a special horn made by the dwarves, and his toys. Oh, cute. The dragon had toys. I wonder what they were. Let's see here. The hands of dwarves and the skulls of men which he licked clean.
What?
It's probably a good thing then that Scatha does eventually bite the dust. When Fram, son of Frumgar, the lord of the Ethelwed, basically Northmen, slays him to bring peace to his realm. The problem is he didn't feel like sharing the hoard with the dwarves, who requested some of the spoils, especially because most of it originally belonged to them. Instead, Fram sends them a necklace made out of Scatha's teeth, so the dwarves have a very valid crash out and kill him. Well, at least allegedly. Still, Scatha is somewhat similar to Smaug in that he has an isolated tale about himself, and we get a sense of his personality, being really creepy. And after he's slain, his death still has quite a large impact on the story. He doesn't pack as big a punch as Smaug though, being blind and a cold drake, but Scatha the Worm just seems to roll off the tongue, so I'll give him a 7 out of 10.
Not bad, not bad.
Next, we have a fan favourite, and the biggest, baddest dragon to ever walk the earth, Ancalagon the Black. Ancalagon is famous for being absolutely massive. He's built like the Brian Shaw of dragons, and was part of the host that managed to beat back the Valar. You know, Tolkien's gods? Yeah, them. Ancalagon was the mightiest of his horde, and was Morgoth's trump card. If you've heard of him before, you've probably seen a chart similar to this, and while it's probably not accurate, it should be noted that Ancalagon is commonly believed to be mountain-sized. If this is true, remember that Smaug fit in one of the rooms in Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, and that Ancalagon could have been the size of that mountain. He probably had to be that size to fight gods and gain the upper hand. But in spite of all of his power, he was eventually slain by Deus Ex Erendil, arriving on his flying boat alongside an army of giant eagles. After a long battle, he basically pile drives his ship into Ancalagon. And yes, the Valar had to call Elrond's dad in his flying ship to finally kill this oversized lizard. Ancalagon was so big that him falling over smashed the towers of Thangorodrim, the biggest mountain range around, and probably had something to do with Beleriand going into the sea. Ancalagon's defeat essentially marked the beginning of the end for the War of Wrath. Morgoth was soon defeated and trapped in the Door of Night. Still, as massive and cool as the idea of Ancalagon was, he's not really a character. He's more like a mountain-sized obstacle thriving on the rule of cool. We don't know anything about him personally, and he's a footnote of a larger tale, rather than being the catalyst of that tale, like Smaug and Scatha. Still, I suppose you could argue that the War of Wrath is the biggest battle in Tolkien's Legendarium, and with Ancalagon's death marking the end of Morgoth, he's still a very big deal despite not a lot of screen time. Or I guess page time? And I like the rule of cool, and Ancalagon is the coolest. So he gets an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, baby!
Finally, we have the first and the father of dragons, Glaurung, who has absolutely no relation to Daenerys, the mother of dragons. And yes, I know it is odd to talk about the first dragon last, but Glaurung probably has the most to talk about. Now, Glaurung, being the first dragon, didn't benefit by having wings. He kinda looks like a giant fat lizard, being one of Morgoth's top lieutenants during the First Age. He battled elven kings like Fingon, helped break the siege of Angband, killed a lot of elves during the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, and sacked Nagathrond, taking its treasures as his own hoard. It should be noted that these treasures once belonged to Finrod, the brother of Galadriel, although Glaurung had nothing to do with his death. That was actually all Sauron, well before he got decked by a dog anyway. But we're getting off topic. While elves were a common enemy for Glaurung, he had a personal vendetta against Turin, the protagonist of the Children of Hurin, which Glaurung is the antagonist of, and unlike Scatha and Smaug, who sort of just sit there and wait for the protagonist to come to them, Glaurung is pretty active in his villainy. He doesn't always obey Morgoth, as he revealed himself earlier than the Dark Lord would have liked, and often enjoyed doing his own thing. He's also really petty, like hilariously petty, like borderline Lex Luthor petty. For instance, Glaurung could have just killed Turin after he arrived late to Nagathrond, once the city had already been sacked. The Father of Dragons used his stare to transfix Turin, temporarily paralysing him, which is something he can do for some reason, but instead of just stomping him into the earth, biting his head off or setting him on fire, he instead hatched an elaborate plot of doom for the Children of Hurin. For context, Morgoth really hated Hurin, and so he cursed his children, because apparently Glaurung had to get his pettiness from somewhere. Part of this plan involved Turin's sister, Nienor, and when she eventually met the dragon, he obliterated her memory. Because apparently, this giant fire-breathing lizard can also use Professor X's abilities. Suck on that, Charles. And unlike you, Glaurung can actually walk. Now his plan ends up being even more horrific and kind of morbidly funny when Turin, not knowing that Nienor is his sister because the pair have never actually met, marries her.
Sorry, what?
Ugh, that's gross. Now, Turin does eventually manage to kill the dragon, and when Glaurung snuffs it, he gives Nienor back her memories. At this point, Turin had passed out after his battle with Glaurung, and Nienor believed him dead, so when she realised that her lover was her brother, and now both were dead, she cast herself into a valley to her death. When Turin woke up, he was in such despair that he threw himself upon his sword, joining his sister in the afterlife. So it turns out, despite being hilariously complicated, Glaurung's Web of Doom actually worked. And he's a great villain. Not only does he torment the hero, he also manages to make him fall in love with his sister. And the idea of a massive lizard using mind control powers to mess with Turin and Nienor for a laugh, purely because his boss hates their dad, is hilarious to me. Now, you might be thinking, how can a dragon this mighty be killed by some dude with a sword? But Turin isn't just some dude. At the end of the world, during the Dagor Dagorath, Turin is the one who lands the final blow on Morgoth, so I'm pretty sure Glaurung can be given a bit of slack here. He's got crazy powers, is petty to a hilarious degree, and has the benefit of being the first dragon. What more can you ask for? Well, wings probably, but I'm not ableist. So Glaurung gets a perfect 10 out of 10.
Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
And we're done. There are no more named dragons, at least official ones. There's Urgost in the War in the North game, and probably quite a few others from unofficial materials, but these are the ones that Tolkien himself talked about. Thanks for watching though, and hopefully I'll see you next time.